week 15 of the fantasy football season. And here's a few wide receivers I have as sleepers this week. The first guy, Renalde of the Arizona Cardinals. So right here, DeAndre Hopkins is out with knee surgery for the foreseeable future. And obviously, he's going to be out the remainder of the fantasy playoffs and most likely even the NFL playoffs, which the Cardinals are going to make with their great record this season. So more the last few games, obviously, he hasn't had a big role. But now this week here with Hopkins out, it's next man up over there in Arizona. And they're going to use a lot of three receiver sets with Moore, A.J. Green, and Christian Kirk. So the last few games here for Moore, 11 catches, 51 yards in Week 11 at Seattle. Week 13 at Chicago, 1 catch, 8 yards. And then Week 14 versus the Rams, 2 carries, 11 yards, 3 catches, 5 yards. So right here, great matchup for him in Week 15 at the Detroit Lions, who obviously can't stop no one. The worst team in pro football at 1-11-1 on the year. And Moore's going to have an expanded role, like I mentioned. And right now, he's available still in 75% of fantasy leagues. And he's definitely a great sleeper option with a good matchup. And with DeAndre Hopkins out this week, the next wide receiver is Donovan Jones of the Cleveland Browns. The Browns, they're going down like flies over there. A lot of guys on the safety and protocol list here this week. And Donovan Jones in this ball game, most likely he's going to be the number one receiver with Jarvis Landry as well going on the list. So right here, this team is in shambles with everyone getting sick here. And they want the game to be moved, as Baker Mayfield and the Browns. But the NFL right now is saying they're keeping this game on Saturday versus the Vegas Raiders. So the last few games here for Donovan Jones, Week 9 at Cincinnati, 2 catches, 86 yards, a touchdown. Week 10 in New England, a catch for 16 yards. Week 12 at the Ravens, 2 catches, 10 yards. And then last week in Week 14 versus the Ravens, 5 catches, 90 yards. So right now, they're decimated with this problem here is Cleveland. And like I mentioned, Jones, they're just going to have to force feed him with targets, is Nick Mullins in this game. Don't have many receivers. They're down Kareem Hunt as well, who obviously winds up as a receiver sometimes, and a receiver out of the backfield as well. So Jones, just on volume alone, is a good sleeper option in my opinion. And he's available right now in 86% of fantasy leagues. And the third and final receiver I have as a sleeper this week is James Washington of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I mentioned Washington is a good pickup on the wire early in the week for Week 15. But obviously many people just thought that ball game in Minnesota in Week 14 is a fluke, and rightfully so, but I think here he's getting integrated into the offense more. We know Juju Smith-Schuster's been out for the season the last 6 or 7 weeks here and isn't coming back, obviously. So the last few games here for Washington, Week 11 at the Chargers, 2 catches, 12 yards. Week 12 at Cincinnati, 1 catch for 3 yards. And then last week in Week 14 at the Vikings, he had his breakout game, 4 catches, 65 yards, and a touchdown in this one. So right here, in my opinion, he's a decent threat here is James Washington. But for whatever reason, it just hasn't clicked much for him with this team this season over there in Pittsburgh. And I know Ben's best years are behind him, but the last few weeks, at least Ben Roethlisberger has been throwing the football pretty decent and getting guys involved. So maybe this week here with a good matchup versus the Titans that give up the second most fantasy points to receivers on the season, we could see Washington get behind the defense in this one and have a good game. So that's a few wide receivers I have as sleeper options for Week 15 of the fantasy football season.